In 605 BC, a teenager watched Babylonian soldiers loot the temple of the God of Israel. Then they dragged him 1,000 miles from home, stripped his name, replaced his God, and gave him 3 years to forget everything he was. But Daniel didn't forget. Over the next 70 years, he would survive a furnace, a den of lions, 4 kings, and 2 empires. And he would receive visions so accurate that scholars are still fighting about them 25 centuries later. This is not a Bible study, this is a movie. So, why is this telling of Daniel different from the dozens already on YouTube? Because almost every video about the book of Daniel does one of 3 things. They either give you a Sunday school summary, chapter by chapter, nice and clean, or they skip straight to the prophecy charts, timelines and arrows pointing to the end of the world, or they preach at you. We're not doing any of that. What we're going to do is treat Daniel like what it actually is, one of the greatest stories ever written, and we're going to go where most videos don't, into the original Hebrew and Aramaic text, because here's something almost nobody mentions. The book of Daniel is written in 2 languages. Chapters 1 through 2, verse 3 are in Hebrew. Then it switches to Aramaic, Imperial Aramaic, the language of the Babylonian court, the language of the empire. Then in chapter 8 it switches back to Hebrew for the rest of the book. That's not an accident. That's a literary choice. And when you understand why, the entire book opens up differently. We're going to unpack this like a detective case. I'll show you the evidence. You connect the dots. And along the way, I think you're going to find that this ancient book is talking about something very specific, your life, right now, today. Let's go back to 605 BC. Jerusalem in 605 BC was a city that thought it was untouchable. The Temple of Solomon still stood at the center of everything. It was the place where heaven and earth overlapped. At least that's what every Jewish person believed. God's presence, his Shekinah glory, dwelt in that building. The Ark of the Covenant was inside those walls. And as long as the temple stood, as long as the sacrifices continued, as long as the priests did their work, Jerusalem was protected. That was the theology. That was the assumption everyone operated under. And then Nebuchadnezzar showed up. Nebuchadnezzar II was the crown prince of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the most powerful military force on the planet at that time. Babylon itself was a wonder of the ancient world. The Ishtar Gate, covered in blue glazed bricks and golden dragons, stretched over the processional way. The hanging gardens, if they existed, were there. The city walls were so thick that chariots could race on top of them. This was the superpower. And Nebuchadnezzar had just defeated the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish, which meant that every small kingdom in the region, including Judah, was now in his crosshairs. King Jehoiakim of Judah surrendered. He had no choice, and Nebuchadnezzar did something strategic. He didn't just take gold and silver, he took people. Specifically, he ordered his chief court official, a man named Ashpenaz, to select young men from the royal family and the nobility of Israel. The text in Daniel chapter 1 says they had to be young men without any physical defect, good-looking, showing aptitude for learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. This was a talent extraction program. Babylon wasn't just conquering nations, it was absorbing their best minds. Daniel was one of those young men, along with 3 friends whose Hebrew names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You probably know them by the names Babylon gave them: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And those name changes, they're not just a footnote, they're the whole point. Daniel's Hebrew name, Daniel, means God is my judge. It's a name that carries theology in it. Every time someone called his name, they were making a statement about who had ultimate authority over his life. Babylon renamed him Belteshazzar. That name comes from Bel, one of the chief Babylonian deities, and it roughly means Bel protects his life. They weren't just giving him a new name, they were giving him a new god, a new identity, a new story about who he was and where his protection came from. Hananiah means Yahweh is gracious. They renamed him Shadrach, which likely means command of Aku, referring to the Sumerian moon god. Mishael means who is what God is. They renamed him Meshach, meaning who is what Aku is. It's almost mocking. They took the theological claim in his Hebrew name and replaced it with a pagan god. Azariah means Yahweh has helped. They renamed him Abednego, servant of Nebo, another Babylonian deity. Think about that for a second. 4 teenagers who grew up hearing that Yahweh was the one true God, that Israel was his chosen people, that the temple was the center of the cosmos. And now they've watched that temple get looted. They've been dragged to a foreign empire, and the first thing that empire does is erase their names, erase the part of them that says, I belong to the God of Israel. Now here's the thing that makes this so relevant, it almost hurts. Have you ever been in a situation where everything around you was trying to redefine who you are? A new job where the culture pressures you to be someone you're not. A relationship that slowly stripped away your identity. A season of life where you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself anymore. Where the world around you was saying, this is who you are now. That's exactly where Daniel was standing. 15 years old, 1,000 miles from home, surrounded by the most seductive, most dominant culture on earth. And everything about that culture was designed to make him forget. But Daniel made a decision. The text says, Daniel resolved in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's food or the wine the king drank. Now, this sounds small, it sounds like a dietary choice, but it wasn't. The food and wine came from the king's table, and in the ancient world, that meant it had been offered to Babylonian gods first. Eating it would have been participating in pagan worship. It also would have violated Jewish dietary laws, the kashrut, which were a core part of Jewish identity. The laws about what you eat weren't just health codes, they were daily reminders. Every meal was a liturgy that said, I am different, I am set apart, I belong to Yahweh. So when Daniel refused the food, he wasn't being picky. He was drawing a line, a quiet, non-confrontational, remarkably strategic line. He didn't stage a protest. He didn't lecture anyone. He went to the chief official and proposed a test. 10 days, let us eat vegetables and drink water, then compare our health with the young men eating the royal food. The official agreed. 10 days passed. Daniel and his friends looked healthier than everyone else. This is the first pattern in the book of Daniel, and it repeats over and over. Quiet resistance. It wasn't rebellion, and it wasn't compromise. It was something harder than both. Daniel figured out how to serve a pagan empire with excellence while keeping his identity intact. And if you're watching this thinking, that's nice, but I'm not in ancient Babylon, consider this. You might be closer to Babylon than you think. Because Babylon in the Bible isn't just a place, it's a system. It's any culture that says, give me your allegiance, let me name you, and I'll give you power, comfort, and success in return. Sound familiar? It should. 3 years pass. Daniel completes his training. He enters the king's service. And then something happens that changes everything. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Now, in the ancient world, dreams from kings were a big deal. Every empire had an entire class of professional dream interpreters. Babylon had astrologers, enchanters, sorcerers, and a group called the Chaldeans, who were essentially the intellectual elite of Babylonian society. These were the best minds in the world. When the king had a dream, they were supposed to explain it. But Nebuchadnezzar did something that nobody expected. He didn't just ask them to interpret the dream. He demanded that they tell him what the dream was in the first place. He either forgot the dream, or he was testing them. The text in chapter 2 says the king told his wise men, "Tell me the dream, and then interpret it. If you can't, I'll have every one of you cut to pieces and your houses turned into rubble." The wise men panicked. This was an impossible demand. Nobody can tell someone else what they dreamed. They begged the king to at least describe the dream so they could work with it. But Nebuchadnezzar wasn't budging. He said, "I know you're stalling. If you can't tell me the dream, it proves you're frauds." And then he gave the order to execute every wise man in Babylon, every astrologer, every sorcerer, every advisor, all of them. including Daniel and his friends who technically fell into that category even though they hadn't been in the room. When the commander of the king's guard, a man named Arioch, came to carry out the death sentence, Daniel didn't panic. The text says he responded with wisdom and discretion. He asked Arioch what was going on, got the full story, and then went directly to the king to ask for time. And then Daniel did the one thing that would define his entire life. He prayed. He gathered Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they asked the God of heaven for mercy concerning this mystery. That night, God revealed the dream and its interpretation to Daniel in a vision. But before Daniel runs to the palace, before he stands before the most powerful man on earth, he stops and prays again. And this prayer is recorded in full. It's a poem, actually. And in the Aramaic text, it's beautiful. Daniel says, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him." Daniel is standing in the capital of the mightiest empire in the world, and he's saying, God is the one who removes kings and sets up kings. That is an audacious thing to say in Babylon. Daniel goes before Nebuchadnezzar, and he says something critical first. He says, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or astrologer can explain to the king the mystery he's asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." He didn't say, "I'm really smart," or "let me show you my abilities." Daniel redirected all the credit before he said a single word about the dream. Then he tells the king exactly what he saw: a massive statue, enormous, dazzling, terrifying. The head was made of pure gold. The chest and arms were silver. The belly and thighs were bronze. The legs were iron. And the feet, this is the strange part, the feet were a mixture of iron and clay. And as the king watched, a stone was cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet, and the whole thing shattered. The gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay all broke into pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without a trace, but the stone that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Now here's where it gets extraordinary. Daniel interprets each section. The head of gold, he tells Nebuchadnezzar directly, is you. You are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise inferior to yours. That's the silver. Then a third kingdom, bronze, that will rule over the whole earth. Then a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, that will crush and break everything. And the feet, the mixture of iron and clay, a divided kingdom, partly strong and partly brittle. The people will be a mixture but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Now, for anyone watching this who knows their ancient history, the fulfillment is almost absurdly precise. The head of gold, Babylon, the Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar, no dispute from any historian. The chest and arms of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire. In 539 BC, the Persians under Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. The two arms even correspond to the dual nature of the empire, the Medes and the Persians united under one crown. The belly and thighs of bronze, Greece. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in 331 BC, and his generals divided the territory after his death. Greek culture, Hellenism, spread across the known world. Bronze was actually the defining metal of Greek military equipment. The legs of iron, Rome. The Roman Empire was known for its iron military discipline and crushing power. It ruled more territory and lasted longer than any previous empire. And the feet of iron mixed with clay. This is where scholars start debating. Some see it as the fragmented remains of the Roman Empire. Others see it as the divided kingdoms of Europe. Others see it as yet unfulfilled. The iron and clay, strength and brittleness, unity attempted but never achieved. What nobody debates is the stone cut without human hands that strikes the statue and becomes a mountain that fills the earth. Daniel says, In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will not be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. For believers, this is the kingdom of God, something not built by human hands, something that starts small, like a stone, and grows until it fills everything. Nebuchadnezzar's response is remarkable. He falls face down before Daniel and says, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries." The mightiest ruler on earth kneeling before a Jewish exile, acknowledging a God he didn't even believe in an hour ago. But I want you to pause here and think about something. Daniel was given this vision of world history, centuries of empires rising and falling, and the message wasn't, "Here's a timeline." The message was, God is in control. Every kingdom of man, no matter how golden, no matter how dominant, is temporary. They rise, they crumble. The head of gold turns to dust like everything else. And if that's true of empires, it's true of everything you're worried about right now. The thing that feels permanent, the situation that feels like it will never change, the circumstance that feels like iron. It has feet of clay. It's temporary. The only thing that lasts is the stone. Sometime later, and we don't know exactly how long, Nebuchadnezzar built an image of gold. The text says it was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, standing on the plain of Dura outside Babylon, a massive golden statue gleaming in the Mesopotamian sun. And the king issued a command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, every person must fall down and worship the golden image. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Think about the irony. After the dream of the statue, where Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that he was the head of gold but that his kingdom would eventually fall, the king's response was to build an entire statue of gold, as if to say, "My kingdom will be all gold. I won't be replaced." It's a direct act of defiance against the prophecy he was just given. The music plays. Thousands of officials from across the empire fall flat on their faces, but 3 men remain standing: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel isn't mentioned in this chapter, and scholars have speculated about why for centuries. Maybe he was traveling on official business. Maybe he was exempt as a high-ranking official. The text doesn't say. But his 3 friends are there, and they're standing. Some Babylonian astrologers, the text calls them Chaldeans, notice, and they bring it to the king's attention. The Aramaic text uses a phrase here that literally translates to "ate the pieces of the Jews." It's an idiom for slander, for tearing someone apart with accusations. These men weren't concerned about religious devotion, they were jealous. They wanted these foreigners gone. Nebuchadnezzar is furious. He summons the 3 men and gives them one more chance. "Is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image I set up? I'll give you one more opportunity. When you hear the music, fall down and worship. But if you don't, you'll be thrown into the furnace immediately. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? What God will rescue you from my hand?" The 3 men's response is one of the most extraordinary statements of faith ever recorded. And in the Aramaic, it hits even harder than most English translations convey. They say, "Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer in this matter." That phrase, "we do not need to give you an answer," comes from the Aramaic root that means to be careful or to hesitate. They're saying, we don't need to think about this, there's no deliberation, we already know our answer. Then they say, "If the God we serve is able, he will deliver us from the blazing furnace and from your hand, O king." And then comes the line that changes everything. "But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up, even if he does not." In Aramaic, the phrase is hen la, 2 small words, and they contain an entire theology. There's a version of faith that says God will always rescue you, that if you pray hard enough, if your faith is strong enough, the miracle will come. And sometimes it does. But these three men said something deeper. They said, "We believe God can save us, but even if He doesn't, we're not bowing." That is a completely different kind of faith. That's not transactional. That's not, "I'll follow you as long as you give me what I want." That's unconditional. That's, "I belong to you regardless of the outcome." And honestly, this is the kind of faith that most people have never been taught, because most religious content, most sermons, most inspirational videos, they focus on the miracle. They focus on the furnace door opening and everyone walking out unharmed. But the real faith happened before the furnace. The real faith was, even if He does not. Now think about your own life. Is there something you've been praying about, begging God for, and the answer hasn't come? A healing that hasn't happened, a relationship that hasn't been restored, a situation that hasn't changed no matter how hard you pray. The question the book of Daniel puts in front of you is not, do you believe God can? The question is, will you still stand if He doesn't? That's the furnace. That's where faith is actually tested. Nebuchadnezzar was so enraged that he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. It was so hot that the soldiers who threw the 3 men in were killed by the heat. And then Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace and saw something that made him leap to his feet. He said, "Wasn't it 3 men we tied up and threw into the fire? Look, I see 4 men, loose and walking around in the fire, and they are unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods." The Aramaic phrase is Bar Elohim, son of the gods, or, depending on how you translate it, a son of God. Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king, looked into a furnace meant for execution and saw a divine figure walking in the flames with 3 condemned men. The 3 men walked out. The fire had not harmed their bodies, the text says. Their hair wasn't singed, their robes weren't scorched, there was no smell of fire on them. And Nebuchadnezzar, for the 2nd time, acknowledged the God of Israel. He issued a decree that no one in the entire empire could say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But here's the part that stays with me. The 4th figure in the furnace wasn't seen before the men went in. The divine presence didn't show up to prevent the fire or to keep them from the furnace. It showed up to be with them in it, and I think that might be the most important thing in this entire story for anyone watching right now. Sometimes God doesn't remove the fire. Sometimes He walks through it with you. And maybe you're in a furnace right now. Maybe the heat is unbearable, and you're wondering where God is. The book of Daniel says He's right there, in the fire, walking beside you, even if you can't see Him yet. Decades pass. Nebuchadnezzar eventually went through his own humbling, which is a whole story in itself. Chapter 4 describes a period where the king went mad, living like an animal in the fields for 7 years, until he acknowledged that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms. He was restored, and then he died. Power changed hands. And by the time we reach Daniel chapter 5, we've skipped ahead to the night of October 12th, 539 BC. The king is now Belshazzar, likely a grandson or descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. And Belshazzar is throwing a party. 1,000 of his nobles are drinking wine. The atmosphere inside the palace banquet hall in Babylon is reckless, extravagant, dripping with arrogance. And then Belshazzar does something shocking. He orders his servants to bring out the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, the sacred vessels, the ones that were used in the worship of Yahweh in the Holy of Holies. He has his guests drink wine from them, while praising the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. This wasn't just disrespectful. In the ancient world, this was a deliberate provocation. It was like saying, "Your God is so weak that I can use his sacred objects as party cups." It was a theological statement. And then, suddenly something appeared. The text says, "The fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote." Just a hand, no body, no figure. Disembodied fingers writing on the wall of the banquet hall while 1,000 drunk nobles watched. Belshazzar's face turned pale. His knees knocked together. His legs gave way. The Aramaic text is vivid here. It describes physical terror at a level that feels almost cinematic. The king of Babylon was trembling like a child. He called for his wise men. None of them could read the writing. And then the queen, possibly Nebuchadnezzar's widow or daughter, came in and told Belshazzar about Daniel. She said, "There's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods." Daniel was brought in. He was probably in his 80s by now. He had served under Nebuchadnezzar for decades, and then seemingly been forgotten during the reigns that followed. He walked into that banquet hall, an old man standing before a terrified king. Belshazzar offered him gifts, a purple robe, a gold chain, the position of third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel's response was cutting. "Keep your gifts, give your rewards to someone else, but I will read the writing for you." And then Daniel delivered one of the most devastating speeches in all of Scripture. He reminded Belshazzar of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, how God humbled him, how the great king ate grass like an animal until he learned that the Most High God is sovereign over human kingdoms. Then Daniel looked at Belshazzar and said, "But you, his successor, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines drank wine from them." Now the writing, 4 words in Aramaic, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Daniel translated them. Mene means numbered. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Upharsin, or Perez in its singular form, means divided. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. There's actually a wordplay here that gets lost in English. Perez sounds like the word for Persia, so the judgment contains the name of the conqueror within it. That very night, Belshazzar was killed. Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Babylon fell. And here's the historical context that makes this almost unbelievable. While Belshazzar was partying inside the walls of Babylon, the Persian army under Cyrus had diverted the Euphrates River, which ran under the city walls. The water level dropped. The soldiers waded through the riverbed, entered the city underneath the walls, and took Babylon without a major battle. The greatest fortress in the ancient world fell in a single night, while its king was getting drunk with sacred goblets. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus and the Babylonian chronicle called the Nabonidus Chronicle both corroborate this. The city fell so fast that, according to Herodotus, people in the center of Babylon didn't even know it had been captured until it was too late. Daniel, the old exile, the man who had been brought to Babylon as a teenager, watched the empire that kidnapped him crumble, just like the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Gold replaced by silver. Babylon replaced by Persia, exactly as the vision had said. Under the new Persian administration, Daniel didn't just survive the regime change, he thrived. The new ruler, Darius, divided the kingdom into 120 provinces, each governed by a satrap, overseen by 3 administrators. Daniel was one of those 3, and he was so exceptional, so clearly superior in wisdom and character, that Darius planned to make him ruler over the entire kingdom. The other administrators and satraps were furious. They tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs. The text says they could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Think about that. In a system built on bribery and political manipulation, Daniel was clean, completely clean. So they came up with another plan. They convinced Darius to issue a decree that for 30 days, anyone who prayed to any god or human being except the king would be thrown into the lion's den. Darius signed it, and under the law of the Medes and Persians, once a decree was signed, it could not be revoked, not even by the king himself. Daniel heard about the decree, and here's what he did. He went home, opened the windows of his upper room toward Jerusalem, and prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done. He didn't hide. He didn't pause his practice. He didn't say, "I'll pray quietly in my closet for 30 days." He opened his windows toward Jerusalem, the city that had been destroyed, the temple that was in ruins. And he prayed, facing the place where God's presence had once dwelt, facing home. The conspirators caught him, of course. That was the point. They brought the accusation to Darius, who was devastated. The text says the king was greatly distressed and tried to find a way to save Daniel. He spent the entire day trying to rescue him. But the law was the law. Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. And Darius, the king who signed the decree, said something remarkable as the stone was placed over the mouth of the den. He said, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A pagan king speaking words of faith over a man of God. Because Daniel's consistency, his integrity, his decades of faithfulness had made an impression so deep that even the man who sentenced him to death believed in Daniel's God. Darius spent the night fasting. He couldn't sleep. At the first light of dawn, he rushed to the den and called out in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And from the pit, Daniel answered, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight." Daniel was lifted out without a scratch, and the men who had conspired against him, along with their families, were thrown into the same den. The lions overpowered them before they even reached the floor. Darius then issued a decree throughout the entire empire that people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Daniel's life was saved. But I think the more important thing is what this scene reveals about the nature of faithfulness. Daniel was probably in his late 80s at this point. He had been praying toward Jerusalem 3 times a day for roughly 70 years. 70 years. Through the fall of his homeland, through exile, through multiple kings and empires, through promotions and demotions and being forgotten and then called back again. And in all of that, his practice never changed. Open the windows, face Jerusalem, pray. Why does that matter for you? Because faithfulness is not about intensity. It's about consistency. It's not about the grand gestures. It's about what you do today and tomorrow and the day after when nobody's watching. Daniel didn't suddenly become a man of faith when the lion's den showed up. He'd been building that faith, prayer by prayer, day by day for 7 decades. Whatever you're building in your life right now, this is the lesson. The lion's den didn't make Daniel who he was. It revealed who he'd been all along. If you're still here at this point, you're not a casual viewer. You actually care about what these ancient texts say. Hit subscribe because we go this deep every single week, into the Hebrew and Aramaic, into the history and the mystery. Now let's keep going, because what Daniel saw next might be the most controversial part of this entire book. Now we enter the second half of the book of Daniel, and this is where things shift dramatically. The first 6 chapters were narrative, stories, drama. The last 6 chapters are apocalyptic visions, and they're some of the most debated passages in all of ancient literature. In chapter 7, Daniel himself has a dream. He sees 4 great beasts coming up out of the sea. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings. As Daniel watched, the wings were torn off and the beast was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human, and a human mind was given to it. The second beast looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." The third beast looked like a leopard, but it had 4 wings on its back and 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. The fourth beast was terrifying and dreadful and very strong. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. Now, these beasts correspond to the same empires in Nebuchadnezzar's statue dream, but from a different perspective. The statue was how the empires looked from the outside, gleaming, impressive. The beasts are how they looked from God's perspective, monstrous, predatory. The lion with eagle's wings is Babylon. The winged lion was literally the symbol of Babylon. You can see it on archaeological reliefs from that period, the wings being torn off and the beast standing upright with a human mind given to it corresponds to Nebuchadnezzar's madness and restoration in chapter 4. The bear, raised on one side, is Medo-Persia. The raised side represents the dominance of Persia over the Medes. The 3 ribs are commonly identified as the 3 major conquests of the Persian Empire: Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. The leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads is Greece under Alexander the Great. A leopard is fast. 4 wings make it faster. Alexander conquered the known world in about 10 years. He died at 32, and after his death his empire was divided among 4 generals, the 4 heads. Cassander took Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus took Thrace and Asia Minor. Seleucus took Syria and the East. Ptolemy took Egypt and Israel. And the 4th beast, the terrible one with iron teeth, is Rome. But then Daniel sees something else, something that shifts the entire vision from political to cosmic. He sees thrones set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, the hair of his head white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, its wheels were ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. This is one of the most vivid descriptions of God in the entire Old Testament, the Ancient of Days, the one who sits above every empire, every beast, every kingdom of man. And he opens the books. Court is in session, history is being judged. And then Daniel sees someone approaching the Ancient of Days. One like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. The Son of Man, Bar Inash in the Aramaic. A figure who looks human but rides the clouds of heaven, which in Old Testament imagery is something only God does. He receives worship from all nations. His kingdom never ends. For Christians, this is a direct messianic prophecy pointing to Jesus, who consistently referred to himself as the Son of Man, using this exact title from Daniel chapter 7. It was his most common self-designation, not Son of God, Son of Man. And every Jewish person who heard him say it knew exactly where the title came from. But you don't have to be a Christian to recognize the literary power of what Daniel is describing: a cosmic courtroom, empires like beasts, and a figure who transcends all of them, who receives an everlasting kingdom while the beasts are stripped of their power. Daniel chapter 8 gives an even more specific vision: a ram with 2 horns, one longer than the other, charging westward, northward, and southward. The ram is identified by name in the text itself. The angel Gabriel tells Daniel explicitly, "The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia." Then a goat comes from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground, moving so fast it seems to fly. It has a prominent horn between its eyes. The goat attacks the ram and shatters both its horns. The goat becomes very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn is broken off, and 4 prominent horns grow in its place. Gabriel interprets this too. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. That's Alexander. The 4 horns that replaced the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. The 4 successor kingdoms, predicted with the names of the empires included in the text. And this is where the scholarly debate gets heated. Because if Daniel wrote this during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC, then he predicted the rise of Persia, the conquests of Alexander the Great, the four-way division of Alexander's empire, and the subsequent Seleucid and Ptolemaic conflicts over Israel, all centuries before they happened. The predictions are so specific that many critical scholars have argued that the book must have been written later, around 165 BC during the Maccabean period, after these events had already occurred, the idea being that no one could have predicted these things in advance. But here's the counter-argument that conservative scholars raise. The Book of Daniel was included in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which was being compiled in the 3rd century BC. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the caves at Qumran, included 8 copies of Daniel, some dating to the 2nd century BC, and the text was already being treated as authoritative scripture, not as a new composition. There's also the question of Daniel chapter 11, which we'll get to shortly, because the prophecy in that chapter is so specific, so detailed, that it reads like a history textbook written in advance. And the implications of that are staggering. Daniel chapter 9 is different from every other chapter in the book. It starts not with a vision, but with a prayer, and it's one of the most raw, honest prayers in the entire Bible. Daniel has been reading the scroll of Jeremiah, the prophet who predicted that the exile in Babylon would last 70 years, and Daniel does the math. The 70 years are almost up. The exile should be ending. So Daniel prays. And his prayer is not, "God, when are you going to fix this?" His prayer is a confession. He says, "We have sinned and done wrong. We have been wicked and have rebelled. We have turned away from your commands. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets." Notice the pronouns, we, not they. Daniel includes himself. This man, who the text describes as having no corruption in him, who was faithful for 70 years, identifies himself with the sin of his people. He doesn't stand apart from them. He stands with them. That is what real intercession looks like, not pointing fingers, standing in the gap. While Daniel is still praying, still in the middle of his confession, the angel Gabriel appears. The same Gabriel who will later appear to a young woman named Mary in a village called Nazareth. Gabriel says, "Daniel, I have come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, a word went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved." You are greatly beloved. In Hebrew, shamudot, it means precious, treasured, desired. The God of the universe, through his messenger, told an old man in exile that he was greatly beloved. Can you hear that for yourself? Whatever you're going through right now, whatever shame or failure or confusion you're carrying, those words are not just for Daniel. If you're seeking God with the kind of honesty Daniel showed in that prayer, you are greatly beloved too. Then Gabriel delivers the prophecy of the 70 weeks. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Now the word weeks in Hebrew is shavuim, which literally means sevens. Most scholars interpret these as sevens of years, not days, so 70 weeks equals 490 years. Gabriel breaks it down. From the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 69 weeks of years, or 483 years. After those 62 weeks, the Mashiach, the Anointed One, will be cut off and have nothing. Mashiach, Anointed One. This is where the English word Messiah comes from, and Daniel is being told that the Messiah will be cut off, the Hebrew word karat, which implies a violent death. The starting point for this timeline is the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. If you use the decree of Artaxerxes I to Nehemiah in 445 BC, which authorized the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls, and count 483 years using the ancient 360-day prophetic calendar, you arrive at approximately 32 to 33 AD. The approximate year of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. You can check the math yourself. It's been calculated by scholars across centuries and traditions. The British scholar Sir Robert Anderson published a detailed study of this in 1894 that has never been conclusively refuted. Whether you believe Jesus is the Messiah or not, the mathematical precision of this prophecy is remarkable. A timeline given to a man in Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC, pointing to a specific window in the 1st century AD. And the prophecy says the Messiah will be cut off after the 69th week, but before the destruction of the city and the sanctuary. Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. So whoever the Mashiach is in Daniel's prophecy, they had to appear and be cut off after 32 to 33 AD, but before 70 AD. The window is narrow, the implications are enormous. We've arrived at the final section of the book of Daniel, chapters 10 through 12, and this is where the book reaches its emotional and spiritual climax. Daniel is now an old man. He's in his 80s or 90s. He's lived through the entire exile. He's seen Babylon fall. He served under Cyrus the Persian. And in the 3rd year of Cyrus's reign, Daniel receives his final vision. But before the vision comes, Daniel mourns. For 3 full weeks, he eats no choice food, no meat, no wine. He doesn't anoint himself with oil. He is in deep grief. The text doesn't tell us exactly why, but many scholars believe it's because the returned exiles in Jerusalem were facing opposition in rebuilding the temple, and Daniel's heart was breaking for his people. After 21 days, Daniel is standing by the Tigris River, that great river that runs through the heart of Mesopotamia, and he looks up and sees a figure, a man dressed in linen with a belt of fine gold around his waist. His body was like topaz. His face was like lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and legs were like the gleam of burnished bronze. And his voice was like the sound of a multitude. The men with Daniel didn't see the vision, but they were so overcome with terror that they fled and hid. Daniel alone remained, and he collapsed. All his strength left him. His face turned deathly pale. He fell into a deep sleep, face to the ground. Then a hand touched him, and a voice said, "Daniel, you who are greatly beloved, understand the words I am about to speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." The same words, greatly beloved, Shamudo. And then comes one of the most mysterious passages in the entire Bible. The angelic figure says, "Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia." Read that again carefully. From the first day Daniel started praying, his words were heard. The answer was dispatched immediately, but something opposed the delivery. A spiritual entity described as the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted the angel for 21 days. The same 21 days Daniel was fasting and mourning. This passage pulls back the curtain on something that most of us never see, a spiritual dimension operating behind the physical one, political kingdoms with spiritual counterparts, angelic warfare happening in response to human prayer, and the staggering implication that Daniel's persistent prayer for 21 days was somehow connected to the spiritual battle being fought on his behalf. Think about the times you've prayed and nothing seemed to happen. The times you fasted, begged, wept before God, and heard only silence. The book of Daniel suggests that your prayers were heard on the first day. But there may be a battle happening that you can't see. This doesn't mean your prayers aren't working, it means the opposite. Your prayers carry so much weight that they generate opposition. The silence isn't indifference, it's warfare. The angel then gives Daniel a prophecy in chapter 11 that is so detailed, it reads like a news report written before the events happened. Without going through every verse, the prophecy describes the succession of Persian kings after Cyrus, the rise of Alexander the Great, the division of his empire, and then, in extraordinary detail, the conflicts between the Seleucid kings to the north and the Ptolemaic kings to the south, with Israel caught in between. It describes military campaigns, political marriages, betrayals, and tactical maneuvers that historians can match event by event with recorded history. The king of the north and the king of the south, fighting over the beautiful land, which is Israel. Specific battles, specific alliances, specific betrayals. The prophecy culminates in a description of a figure most scholars identify with Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the Seleucid king who desecrated the Jewish temple in 167 BC by setting up an altar to Zeus in the Holy of Holies and sacrificing a pig on the altar. This event is called the abomination of desolation in Daniel's prophecy, a phrase Jesus later quoted when describing future events. The level of historical accuracy in Daniel chapter 11 is precisely why the dating debate matters so much. If this was written in the 6th century BC, it's one of the most remarkable predictive documents in human history. If it was written in the 2nd century BC, it's an after-the-fact historical account dressed up as prophecy. The evidence can be evaluated: the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint timeline, the linguistic analysis of the Aramaic, the structure of the text. But regardless of where you land on dating, the literary and theological power of the vision is undeniable. Because Daniel chapter 12, the final chapter, ends with something that goes beyond politics and empires. The angel says, "At that time Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. And then this: multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever." This is one of the clearest references to bodily resurrection in the entire Old Testament. Sleep in the dust, awake to everlasting life, shine like stars. For a man who spent his entire life in exile, who watched his homeland destroyed, who served foreign kings and outlived empires, this is the ultimate promise. Death is not the end. The dust is not the final word. Those who are wise, those who are faithful, will shine. And Daniel, the old prophet, receives his final instruction. "But you, Daniel, close up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end." And then, in the very last verse of the book, "As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then, at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." Go your way. You will rest. You will rise. After everything Daniel endured, the exile, the furnace, the lion's den, the visions of beasts and empires and cosmic warfare. After all of it, God's final word to Daniel is gentle, almost tender. Go your way, rest, and when all things are made new, you'll receive everything that was promised. So why does any of this matter to someone watching a screen in the 21st century? Because the book of Daniel answers the question that almost every person on earth is asking, whether they realize it or not. How do you stay faithful when the world is trying to remake you? Daniel was dragged into an empire that wanted to give him a new name, a new diet, a new education, a new religion, and a new God. And he navigated all of it without losing himself. He served with excellence. He rose to the highest levels of power. He was respected by pagan kings. And through it all, he kept opening his windows toward Jerusalem and praying. That is the model. Daniel didn't retreat, didn't compromise, and didn't rebel. He did something more sophisticated. He engaged without assimilating. He excelled without surrendering. He served the city he was in while never forgetting the city he belonged to. Maybe you're living in your own Babylon right now, a workplace that demands you compromise your values to get ahead, a culture that wants to rename you, redefine you, tell you who you are. A season where everything you believed has been shaken and you're not sure what's left. Daniel would tell you this. The empires are temporary. The fire is temporary. The lions are temporary. The only thing that lasts is the stone not cut by human hands, the kingdom that fills the earth, the promise that you will rise. And those words Gabriel spoke over Daniel, They apply to you right now. You are greatly beloved. It has nothing to do with your performance, your achievements, or whether you figured everything out. Daniel was in exile, confused, mourning, fasting for 3 weeks with no answer, when those words were spoken over him. He was at his lowest, and God called him greatly beloved. If that doesn't change how you see yourself, I don't know what will. The book of Daniel was written in 2 languages, by a man who lived in 2 worlds, about a God who rules over all worlds. And 2,500 years later, the scroll hasn't been closed. The visions are still being debated, the story is still being told, and the promise is still standing. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars, forever and ever. That's the book of Daniel. Not a Sunday school story, a survival guide, written in fire. If this hit different for you, if you felt something shift while watching this, do me a favor, hit subscribe. We go deep into the ancient texts every single week on this channel, into the Hebrew and Greek, into the history and the mystery, and we always bring it back to your life. Next week's video is one you won't want to miss. And if you want to keep going right now, click the video on screen. I'll see you there.